so much. A very good morning to all of you, to everyone. I'm very happy to be here with you. Happy that you're here with us. We're very excited to be able to hold this training with you about the basic principles of in-person outreach. So if we go out to the fields to do some sort of outreach, what do we need to know ahead of time? And what are the things that we need to consider in terms of the way that we do in-person outreach? So I'm going to give Alexis the word. I'm going to give Alexis the floor so that she can tell us a little bit about farm workers justice. Thank you so much, Lucy. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being with us today. I am Alexis. I am the Director of Health Policies and Programs at Farmworker Justice. It was founded in 1981. And Farmworker Justice is a nonprofit organization. It's not for profit, and we're based in Washington, D.C. And we aim to empower farm workers to improve their working and living conditions and also their immigration status, their health, and access to justice. And I'm going to now give the floor back to Lucy. Thank you so much, Alexis. Like Lupita said earlier, we are from the Centro de los Derechos del Migrante, the Center for Migrant Rights. This is a binational migrant workers' rights organization based in Mexico and the US that advocates alongside migrant workers to advance their labor rights, especially those with temporary visas, in order to give them information about their labor rights and also to help them with legal support. We also have a legal team. So that is what takes up the majority of our work, to help people to improve or to be able to exercise their labor rights in the long term. And also here are some of my co-workers who are going to tell you more about that type of outreach that we do specifically in Mexico. That is the plan for today. And so we're going to start with a little bit of information about demographics. And Alexis is going to share with us some information about who the H-2A farm workers are in general terms in the US. Thank you, Lucy. I think that before we start talking about outreach, we need to provide a brief introduction to the demographic information of H-2A workers. If you all have already been to the other webinars in the series, then this information is something that you already know or you have already seen. In 2021, there were more than 300,000 certified H-2A worker positions, and this is almost twice as many as there were in 2016. So within 5 years, there has been an increase to almost twice as many H-2A workers. And this is going to continue to grow this year as well. The majority of these workers are from Mexico. And the majority of them are young men that are between 18 and 35 years of age. It's important to note, though, that there's an increasing number of workers coming from Central America. This is important because these workers may feel more comfortable speaking in their native indigenous languages like Mixteco and Quiche, specifically because many of them don't know a lot of Spanish. And there are different cultural ideas that are different from those from the Spanish speakers from Mexico in particular. So it's important that we think about these persons. We think about these people when we're planning our outreach activities. So having said that, I will give the floor back to Lucy so she can tell us more about the Department of Labor portal and how we can understand and know where these workers are in the United States. Perfect. Thank you so much, Alexis. Before we begin this session, I would like to ask all of you who are watching this training, how many of you have already heard of a job order? Or who's already dealing with job orders so that you can plan some of your outreach trips. If you want to put that in the chat, if you're already familiar with job orders, please let us know somehow by raising your hand or stating so in the chat. Yes, we see Abigail. Okay. Anybody else? Andalis, Rob. We see people. We see more people. Okay, great, wonderful. Thank you. So this information may not be that useful to you specifically, but we hope that it'll be at least somewhat useful so that we can understand how we can use the information that's already available publicly in order to help us find these workers. So I feel that this is going to be especially useful to those of you who have not seen these numbers before or they've seen this data before. So let's begin by speaking about this, about job orders. Before that, I have one more question. If you go to a farm and you want to do outreach to the workers there who are H-2A visa holders, what are some of the things that we would like to know before we go to the farm? One example would be their arrival dates. When are the workers going to arrive at the farm? Because we don't want to be there so soon that we don't even find them, that they haven't arrived yet. That would be important for us to know. I see Abigail wants to comment. What do you think? Well, I don't know. Can you speak?
Perdón, en el chat, Cristín Queiroz comenta que
in the chat, Christine Queiroz says that it would be the full address and the worker's work schedule. Thank you, Christian. Anybody else who would like to share what would be important to know? If we go to a farm for the first time, what is something that we would like to know ahead of time? Okay. Their lunch schedule, the farm workers' work schedule, that would be good. Okay. Ruthie, I see you raise your hand. Would you like to share something? Ruby says, yes, I would also like to know if their supervisors or managers are okay with us going, because sometimes we know that the place where maybe close by a locked fence, maybe they don't want us to go, or perhaps it would be important for them to know when we're going so that they could open the gates for us. Yes, that would also be important. Also, we have Glenda and Ninel commenting the number of workers, whether they are getting paid for all of their working hours, also the number of male and female workers. Yes, great set of questions. This is all information that we need to have before we go to the farm. That's why we have this data by the Department of Labor, because it will help us find some of the data about the fields that we're going to visit. We also know that this data does not necessarily have all of the information that we want. That's why it's also important that we not only depend on this data, but also that we ask if you go to other community organizations that are doing this type of work to see whether they might have any ideas about maybe the languages that are spoken by the farm workers, their lunch schedules, like somebody already pointed out. So just to know that this is a helpful tool, but it doesn't necessarily provide all of the information that we need. So let's continue. I just want to mention that the link is right here. You will have access to the presentation slides later. So if you want to go through this data, so you'll have the ability to do it. Also, if you want to take a screenshot right here, this is where you want to see the H2A disclosure data. So you'll know where to look. This right here is where you need to click in order to download the information that is most recently updated for the farms for this year. So we're going to review a lot of information in very little time. So something else I want to mention is that if you want to go through this later and you have questions, you will have our contact information. Unfortunately, the information that's available here is only available in English. So that's why we're going to review some of this in Spanish as well. One of the things that is in English is, or one of the things that can be helpful is the employer name. For example, if this could be helpful if you have the ability to maybe search for, do an online search for the employers and find out whether any workers have quit working for this employer or gone or quit another job to go work for them. This might be useful information to have. I can also see Abigail's hand is up. I don't know, Abigail, if you have a comment to make. Okay, apparently not for now. Okay, we will have a question and answer session later, so thank you so much. Other important elements, as some of you already mentioned, is the total number of workers needed and also the total number of workers, of H2A workers have been requested. This is important because it may help us know the amount of material that we need to bring to a farm. Also to know what sort of specific H2A related workers so that we can plan for these H2A farm workers. We also have information about the employment begin date and the employment end date. This is very important information because we don't want to go to a farm if no workers are going to be there at that time. The other thing that's important to see here is that sometimes the dates are different from, their actual dates are different from what we see here. So it's possible that the employees arrive after the employment begin date, and it's also possible that they may leave before the employment end date. That's why it may also be very important to collaborate with other organizations that do this type of work to see whether they might have more exact data about when workers are going to arrive or leave. And if you have, maybe they have been able to speak directly with the farm workers and have that information, which they may have more accurate information. Also important is the address of the worksite address. Also, we know that sometimes the farm workers live right there on the farm where they work, but also sometimes it's not like that. Sometimes they have to drive for 40 minutes from the place they live to the place where they work. That's why it's also important for us to compare the workplace address to their living address, their housing address, to see whether they need to commute, see where they are, and also the type of housing. This may be especially useful if we're going to hold some sort of a workshop or something specific for the farm workers to see whether they're going to be in a hotel or in a house or in a trailer or in some other totally different living type of housing. And it's important for us to have this ahead of time. So this is just again a very brief overview of the information that we have here in this website. And there's also some information that is not included here, like what somebody asked about their lunch schedule. So it's important to have this resource and to keep it handy in case it provides, because it may very well be handy at some point. So now we're going to talk a little more about some of the outreach tips and some of the experiences that we have had within our organization and the type of outreach that we do. That's why we have the great privilege of hearing from Adelina Vasquez and Natasha Montes about the outreach that we do in Mexico. So I'm going to give them the floor.
Hola, muchas gracias a todos por estar aquí con nosotros.
Hello, and thank you everybody for being here with us. As I mentioned, sometimes my signal is a little weak. I'm in Oaxaca, so if you cannot hear me, please send me a message in the text box and I will turn off my camera. I'm going to talk about the outreach experience that we've been having for a few years. One of the things that we think is so important is to go to the migrant worker communities. We think it's very important to listen to their needs, to listen to the work experience that can be shared by those who have already gone out to work and have come back. So some of our work is to go to physically travel and visit to hold meetings at these places with civil organizations, local authorities, with community leaders. Sometimes we can count on of migrant families and migrant workers that help us and that provide support to us directly in these communities in order to hold workshops there. And when we don't have this direct contact, we contact civil organizations there in the community, or maybe some delegates and some of the elected workers or community workers who can help us there. And we go to them for support to obtain maybe the permit, if there may be permits that are needed to hold some of these workshops for the migrant farm workers. So I would like to share with you what are the things that we discuss in these workshops. The topics are so important. What we're primarily looking for is to gain access to information. One of the biggest difficulties we have is that many communities in Mexico are in rural areas and they don't get the information like it was, or like someone else already mentioned, they have a different language and the information they receive in Spanish, for example, and and that's why sometimes we carry out these workshops in their language, like Mixteco. And some of the communities that we go to, there's also the lack of safety. That's something we need to consider before we head out there and analyze all of this, because some of these communities may be in conflict in rural areas where there are territorial conflicts. So it's very important to keep in mind a safety analysis before we head out to these communities. Another fundamental part of these workshops is to have direct contact with the farm workers to be able to develop that trust and have that link with them in order for us to be able to get close to the communities. Sometimes it's through somebody who lives there, sometimes it's through a phone calls, but the most important thing is to create those relationships and trust. Another important thing that needs to be done before the trip is made is to think about who we're going to visit. What sort of group are we going to talk to? Is it a small group or a large group? Are they only farm workers? Are they people who are only who are they only people who have visas, or some that may be traveling without documents? We have to consider the objectives that we carry, and have a work plan that is as detailed as possible so that we can get to these farm workers and that they may have all of the information that we can offer to them. So it's very important to keep in mind all of these small details so that you, when and if you travel, so that when you get there and the doors are closed, so that we have the ability to have a contact within that group of farm workers, maybe somebody who is there permanently, and start to begin establishing a relationship, to having a farm workers, and maybe somebody who can have the role of a leader, who can help us hold these workshops around farm worker rights. We talk about uh, labor rights. We talk about health and safety in their workplace. And in these workshops, we always see cases that we document and then we follow up on. So, in very general terms, I can share with you that this is a beautiful experience, because they learn from you as much, or we learn from them as much as they learn from us. Here we have some people, there are some people that require materials in their own mother language. So we need to explore that. What can we do to have this information arrive so that they can get this information in a different language, in their own mother indigenous languages? So we know that we have a lot of information to share in very little time, but I'd like my colleague Natasha to share with us, because we not only do in-person outreach, but also digitally. Sometimes we're able to do a workshop via Zoom. And this is another one of the ways that we could get close to some of these communities. And like I said, we're not able to reach these communities in person because of safety reasons. There aren't ways for us to to arrive there. So sometimes we have to explore alternative ways of doing this. So I'm going to allow her to tell you more about what we do in order to perform outreach, whether it's directly or indirectly. Thank you, Ade. There are a couple of questions out there, but I don't know whether we should take those questions now or at the end. Well, I think that if you want to answer any of these questions now, we can just hold them until the Q&A session. Well, I think these questions are a little bit more about Ade and what she said. One of the questions is, how do these communities know? How do you know what communities the farm workers are coming from? So we need to identify what places in Mexico they live in. And then the other questions is, what are the steps that CDM takes if a recruiter is charging money? First, how do we know the what communities the farm workers come from? Well, like Lucy already mentioned, we could check in on the website, like where do they come from? There is information about, for example, what states farm workers are being recruited in. We also might have information. We might be able to get information from people we know where their colleagues are coming from. Also from contacts that we have in Mexico. Before COVID, we had the ability to do interviews, and we could go in order to have direct contact with people and ask them directly where people were coming from, and we could document that in a database, so that we could have that from different groups of people, and we could start to investigate through different labor organizations where they're coming from, and where they're coming from. Along with the Department of Labor in Mexico, we can find out more information about them to be able to, so that they can tell us where they're recruiting, and also the departure dates and the return dates, so that we could get organized and go to their workshops before the workers leave or after they come back. So this really helps us in creating that contact with somebody within the farm worker community so that we can get a little bit more information in creating those relationships within the relationship, and at the same time being able being able to obtain from them information about their own co-workers, so that we can start finding out whether they're coming from from Guerrero, Oaxaca, or Tamaulipas, or that helps us quite a bit. And it's very important to document where they come from and also what municipality, because sometimes they'll tell me, okay, I come from Guanajuato, but we don't know from what city or municipality within Guanajuato. We could go there to the capital and not find any workers there. So it's very important to know what municipality these farm workers are coming from. So, like I mentioned, we obtain that sometimes through international organizations or contacts. So, answering the second question, what are the steps that we take, that CDM takes, if we find out about that a recruiter is charging money? That's a complicated issue. We have to be very careful. It's very sensitive. In CDM is we document those cases where a recruiter may be charging them, maybe charging them a certain amount to be on a list or be able to put them on a list for the following year. And the things that we document, or what people tell us, is that they have the right, or the ability to take steps. They have the right to speak up, because many times the employers don't know, or they're not aware that a recruiter is charging them. So when there is a recruiter that's offering a working position and is charging, and this turns into a legal situation, or they could be, or they could turn into a legal situation through a report, because they could be reported maybe through social rights organizations. But it's hard to say we're going to stop this, because this is recruiting fraud and it happens quite a bit. So sometimes it's a false hope or a false offer that they are selling, that they're charging for. And what we recommend is that the worker can leave a comment in our on our website, because there are many workers that visit our website and they can get information about how to avoid being victims of fraud. Because because there they can find out whether the offer they're receiving is true or false. Because we verify a lot of work offers, and they can contact us and we could help them find out. But if somebody has already paid, farm workers have already paid, it would be important to get their experience so that we can help put together a way to keep that from happening. It's also important for us to point out that in the workshops, that we don't mention the recruiters directly. We have to talk about recruitment in a very general sense, also for our own safety. And that's what I want to share with you. I don't know if anybody else has anything else to say. Go ahead.
Gracias. Bueno, yo soy Natasha.
Oh, thank you. I am
Gracias
Natasha.
por tus respuestas. Yo
And
también soy
thanks for your
profesora
answer. I'm
y
also a community health, or
PM,
I'm also
pero me ha
a
tocado
community
tener
health
algunos
worker,
viajes
and I
pues,
have participated in some of
retomando la
these
actividad
trips. Well,
después de la pandemia.
once
Durante
since the pandemic.
años, casi 2 años, suspendimos los viajes justamente
We
por todo
suspended our
esto
trips
de
for
ese análisis,
about 2 years,
análisis de seguridad,
because
y
within
se
that
priorizó
safety
tanto para
analysis, we saw that
personas
it
en
was
efectivo
risky
como para las personas
for us
con
as much as
aplicaciones
for other people to be able
retornadas
to
con
congregate
tarjetas
and
de
have
crédito.
meetings,
A
because it was easy
partir de este año
to
retomamos
spread
algunas de estas
the
actividades
virus. So it hasn't been
y
until
como
this
me
year that we've
decían,
begun
la
to
información de las
start up these
comunidades
activities again.
no es pública.
So the information about the
Existen
communities is
consejos
not public
locales
information. Many
dentro
times it's
de
hard
los
to
lugares
obtain
desde los cuales salen las
sources of
trabajadoras,
information about
pero
the
este
places
también
where farm
incluye
workers are
líneas de
coming
atención
from.
y de orientación
But once we establish some of these support lines or paths to support, we can find people to talk to on the telephone who can give us information. They tell us where they can, what communities they're coming from. And sometimes we're told that there may be, for example, a consistent problem in one area where many people are calling for verification or that they suspect fraud from a single region. We can start to think then or deduce that that an information session and an outreach effort needs to be done into that area. We always try in all of our trips to identify to the highest degree possible, precisely because there isn't a single way to access these farm workers. We, as Ade was saying, we always think about contacting the farm workers directly. We try to ensure that we can meet with the people that we can establish a trusting relationship with. And the second thing is to identify the local authorities or state authorities with whom we can hold a meeting and present these organizational resources with or to the people both at a local or state levels, because there are many different dependencies. And it's important for us to previously identify who are the local authorities in these local, especially the small communities, who are the authorities who we can contact. And then also at a regional level, where several communities belong to, or maybe to what would be the equivalent to a county in the United States. Now, during the times of COVID, it's been very important for us to try to do digital outreach and to combine our efforts to be able to to hold a workshop while we're there, and also to offer the digital resources that have been developed so that when people have the ability to have an internet signal, so that they can go to these places, to these websites, and be able to maintain or to establish or maintain contact with us, to be able to reach out to the farm worker and let them know that our organization, CDM, is there to serve them, to answer their questions, even when we're not their person. And what we do in our in-person trips is to create those trusting relationships, especially because what has been noticed by the people that do in-person outreach both in the United States and in Mexico is that farm workers will respond differently when they're in their community with somebody they trust. Maybe they speak a little more fluently about their difficult or more openly about their own difficulties. Maybe they will be more open to talking about things in their own communities that they won't dare say when they're in the United States, because they may be afraid of ending in a legal. There's also the possibility that they fear ending up in a legal process, but they always want to participate in an information session where we can share with them information about their rights that eventually, maybe not right at that specific moment, but that later this could be in the long term or medium term, that could be something that's helpful to them. It's helpful to them to be able to go to some sort of a orientation type setting. Also, in terms of communication, it's important to establish relationships with the local communication or media outlets, because a lot of people don't have access or they don't use outlets. So sometimes in a small communities in Mexico, people always have, for example, the radio on. They're constantly listening to music. And so maybe their local radio stations could be a very effective way of of promoting this information, maybe through an interview, maybe as an advertisement, just through audio. And during COVID, it's been very important to farm workers who travel with a visa. It's important for them to understand the differences in the vaccine or protection policies, the differences between protection and vaccine policies in Mexico and the United States, because we can talk about these things in a very general sense, but policies in specific places it could be different. So we could say, for example, in the United States, you have the right to get vaccinated, and these are the benefits. Contact us for information, but that's not the way it happens in Mexico. Uh, Vaccinations are not available just at any time, but rather there are campaigns, and the brand of the vaccines that somebody may get may be different, uh, maybe different, and maybe the only whatever's available, maybe the only option that they have. Maybe they don't have the ability to choose the brand of vaccine or the date in which they're vaccinated. There are also specific dates when certain age groups may be vaccinated when other people are not. And if you miss your date, you may not have the ability to get the vaccine that you wanted. So this is something that also creates a lot of doubts among the workers in Mexico. We have also seen that maybe sometimes people who have the H-2A visas and are traveling for the first time, some are avoiding the vaccine in Mexico when they know that the vaccine that is going to be offered at the place where they live is not going to be valid or accepted when they try to come into the United States. So that has been a recent issue. And I'm talking specifically about people who are H-2A visa holders, because this is something that's always growing. And there are always people who are going to be traveling for the first time, who have been recruited or who have been giving job offers for the first time. So this difference or this issue has been identified. Thank you.
Sí, muchas gracias por toda la información, Nat y Ade. Pues
Yeah, thank you,
ahorita
Nathan Ale,
vamos a
for
hacer
all of this information.
una primera ronda de
So
preguntas.
at this time,
Voy
let's
a
do the
ceder la
first
palabra
round
a
of
Alexis para
Q&A.
facilitar
I'm going
esta sesión.
to
Ay, perdón.
allow
Todavía tenemos un poco
Alexis.
más
No,
antes
wait,
de
not
hacer
yet.
todas las
We
preguntas.
still have something to do before the Q&A.
Antes
My bad.
tenemos solo algunas
So let's
consideraciones
talk real
también
quick
para
about a few
acercarnos
considerations about
con los
outreach in
Estados
the
Unidos.
US.
Así que solo algunas consideraciones por
Some
lo
things to
que
consider
es particular, ¿no? Lo que tiene que
about
ver específicamente con
about
este tipo de trabajo, desde lo que hemos
something that
encontrado.
doesn't necessarily have to
Así que una
be
cosa
do specifically
tiene
about
que
this
ver
type of
con
work,
cuándo vamos a
but we
visitar
need
una
to
granja, ¿no?
consider
Y
when we're
sabemos
going to go to the
que sí
farms.
hay horas de
And
trabajo
although we know
en los
that there
datos
are
públicos que
working
tenemos,
hours
muchas
in
veces
the
no
data that's
somos
publicly available,
adaptativos.
they're not
Sabemos que
always
hay muchos
that
meses
firm or
que hay
completely
mucho
fixed.
sol y por eso
So there may
tenemos
be
para
times when
trabajar
we
con
go and
granjas
it's very
de
sunny,
vacas o que
and
hay
so
veces
maybe they
que
will work
sí van
for
a trabajar
different
menos
amount of
del
working
esperado
hours, maybe less
por
hours
cualquier
than expected
hormiguero
because of any
o cosas que
particular
sucedan.
factor that
Así que
we
por eso
cannot
también es
anticipate
muy
or it's out of
importante como
anyone's
desarrollar
control.
contactos
That's why
con
it's
personas
also
trabajadoras
important to develop
con otras
contacts with the
organizaciones
farm workers or with
para
other
entender un poco más
organizations in
de
order
ella,
to have
de
a
los
better
horarios y
idea
todo esto.
of
Así
work
que también
schedules.
acceso a vivienda, como algunos de ustedes ya mencionaron,
Also, we need to consider housing
puede ser un
access.
problema muy grande.
As some of you have
Hay
already
algunos
mentioned, this
estados
could be
que ya tienen
a huge
como
issue.
opiniones públicas que dicen que las personas
There are
de
places in the
organizaciones
US where there are
comunitarias sí
public
tienen
opinions
permiso
that
de
says that there
acceso a
are
la vivienda de las personas trabajadoras, pero no es el caso en todos los estados.
there are
Así que por
places
eso es
where
importante
because of
investigar
public opinion, we may
sobre
have
su
access to
propio
all
estado
or
antes de movernos
some of
en un particular
uh,
estado en los Estados Unidos.
some of the housing, but it's not the
Considera
same in every
bien sus
state.
derechos
That's why it's
como
important
país
to
y
plan
si
this
no, cuáles son
before
las cosas que
while you're
deben
planning
hacer
your
para
outreach,
preparar
to see
cuál
whether you
puede
will
ser
have
dentro de
access
su
to
plan.
the
También
workers'
otra
housing
cosa
so that you can
importante
prepare
para
appropriately.
considerar es la
Something else
ubicación
that's
de
important
los
to
campos de
consider
trabajo.
is the location, where the fields are, where the farms are. We know that there are some places in the United States that are very rural where there may not be internet signals. And if you want to take your iPad to do, to do some of the work, you have to keep this in mind. Sometimes phone signals are different, or that varies from one place to another. So it's important to know whether you'll have access to GPS or how you're going to find this farm. That's why it may be important to have everything written down or having a backup plan in case something were to go wrong. So these are some of those important points. Here we have a couple of pictures. We did a lot of outreach during the fall, specifically to H2A workers, to give them information about COVID, COVID vaccines in Maryland, Delaware, and Virginia, and what some of the experiences are that we've had there. We've also tried to incorporate a lot of popular education within our outreach. And this is something that we've done here. We called it the Vaccination Tree, because this is where people may share their reasons for getting vaccinated, and then we share them with others. This is one of the ways in which we make the outreach more participative, and not just doing one-way communications when you're sharing information in the outreach. So now, once again, I'd like to open it up for question and answers. Yes, thank you. Thank you all. There are so many comments in the chat, and there are some questions. And I also see that, Adelina, I see that you've had your hand raised. Hello, everyone. I would like to congratulate everybody for the excellent work that everybody is doing. I would like to share maybe a little bit of hope. I am in the United States, in South Carolina. Well, something about each of the states in the United States. There is a position which is the monitor defense in the states, and they work with farm workers. By law, there are certain regulations that dictate how they can practice their job. And this also talks about the ability to form organizations like yours that can, where complaints from the farm workers can be sent. These are established in every one of the United States territories. They have a main point of contact in Washington, and also at a regional level in each of the different states. But there's at least one of these organizations in each of the states. So these people can be a valuable resource, so a place where people can file their complaints. So if you hear about a crime or fraud, maybe something that has happened in Mexico, you know that they're going to go to Florida or North Carolina, or etc. So that it's important to give people this contact, so that this monitoring contact at a state level, you could call them, or you can send an email to these people and alert them upfront, letting them know that they will have the ability to be in touch with the Department of Labor or with OSHA or with some of the institutions or government organizations and in the communities, and in order to file to officially file a complaint on behalf of that worker. They are required by law to follow up on these complaints until they are resolved. This could be a helpful resource for you in case you find out of something that is happening in Mexico, that maybe there isn't something that can be done in Mexico, but that once they cross, that they can speak with one of these contacts once inside of the United States, They are within our jurisdiction. In fact, and by the way, I am the South Carolina uh, monitor and defender. And I'm sorry I didn't say that before. So that's how I know about the work that we're doing. So if somebody were coming to my state, they could contact me. And it's important that everybody knows this. We're here to help grow this important work that you're doing, and that we provide this resource for you to be able to officially present these complaints or to file these complaints. In my state, we are an organization for migrant rights, and once a complaint is filed, we can continue to stay in touch and we can tell you how things are going, and we can provide updates and also provide information to their families in Mexico. So this is what I wanted to talk about. I wanted to mention this, and I put the chat in the I put the link in the chat so that you can get more information, and this way you can get the contact information at a regional, state, or national level. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. So we have two more questions. I think this is either for Natasha or Adelina. Okay, comes from Veronique. How can the workers find or apply for those jobs directly? That's the question she's translating into Spanish right now. How can the workers find and apply for these jobs, the H2A jobs, directly?
Ade, ¿quieres contarles del portal migrante?
Ade, would you like to discuss the Migrant Portal?
Ok, gracias.
Okay, sure, thank you.
Pues a raíz de nuestros viajes que hemos hecho y todo esto, hemos
Well,
descubierto que
we've discovered in
esta
these
es una de las
trips that we've done,
necesidades que nosotros
we've discovered that
pensamos y implementamos fue
one of the
crear
ways that
portal
we thought
migrante.
about and created was
Portal
this Migrant
es
Portal.
como un portal donde viene
This
como
is
ofertas laborales
a portal
directamente
where
con las
job offers
empresas,
are
en
posted
donde son las mismas empresas que
directly.
están en la página del Departamento de Trabajo y de Estados
These
Unidos.
are the
Son
companies
las
that
mismas
are
que aparecen en el portal migrante, pero
in
esta
the
es
United
la
States
finalidad de que las
Department of
personas
Labor.
puedan acceder
And we have done
directamente desde el
this
portal
to give
y
people the
puedan
ability
buscar esta oferta de
to
trabajo y ponerse en contacto
look for these job offers directly through the
sin la
portal, and so that they
intervención de
can
una
get in
tercera
touch
persona, ¿no? Entonces,
directly with the
podemos
employees
ver ese lazo que
without
hay
a third
entre
party
empleador,
intervention.
empleado y trabajador, ¿no? Porque es ahí
So
donde
we want
ocurre
there to,
mayormente lo que es el fraude.
we want there to
El
be we
portal
want to see a direct relationship between employer and
es
employee,
donde,
because
como
having a
se ha
middleman
dicho,
is where we
también
see a
derechos
lot of
laborales
fraud.
viene como
Also
buscar la oferta de
within
trabajo
labor rights,
y
one of the topics is how do we
hacemos un
find
link y
we
una
provide
persona
information about labor
directamente,
rights
¿no?
and
De
how to find the
que
jobs, and we do
la
that
misma
through a
persona
link.
tenga esa
And,
facultad de poder buscar
and we want to
cuál es la
give
oferta de
people the
trabajo que
ability to
mayormente
search
les
for
gusta
those
o les
job offers,
interesa
maybe the
y
one that
solicitarlo de
so that
manera
they can look to see
directa, ¿no?
what's
Entonces,
available, and they can
lo
see whatever
único
they might enjoy
destacable
or
que
like the
hemos
best,
encontrado y
and
que
so that they can
por
contact them directly. One of the things that we have found is that
personalizado
it may be a bit of a struggle is through the
algunos
language
llaman, ya hemos
barrier.
tenido experiencia de trabajadores que nos dicen, sí nos
We've
contestan el
had
tono, pero el idioma es totalmente en
we've
inglés.
had
Entonces, a veces las
comments from
personas
some of the farm
no
workers who
pueden
say,
dar
yes, I've called,
esto a
yes,
su
they answered the
persona
phone,
con la
but
que
we're having an
estén.
issue with
Entonces,
language.
ese
So
es el único detalle
a
que hemos tenido.
translator
Y de
or an
nuestro país
interpreter is
mencionamos, por ejemplo,
necessary.
ya hemos tenido caso de 3 personas
And
que fue
we've seen
solicitada
3
a través del
cases where
portal.
people have been able
Entonces, de
to
manera que esta
register for work
información vaya,
directly through
es
the
una de las
portal
herramientas que
by
nosotros
putting them in touch
estamos
directly with the employers. And
desarrollando.
that's one of
Y
the things that
también
we're
una
developing.
de nuestro portal es que tiene una
And something else that I want to say
sección
about our
donde las
portal
personas si tienen preguntas
is
relacionadas
that
sobre algún caso
there's a
específico,
place there where if
pueden
people have
escribirnos y nosotros vamos
questions
a dar
about a specific
seguimiento
job
a
offer,
su
where they can write to us
petición
and we can
de
follow up
asesoría jurídica si requieren.
from
Entonces,
a
también está ligada a nuestra
from a
página
legal
de
standpoint.
contratados, donde
This
hay
is
una serie
also
de
linked
ofertas de trabajo,
to our
admitencia
other website,
jurídica,
Contratados,
condados fiscales y
where there
laborales, pero
are
también hemos
other
subido reseñas sobre
valid job
experiencias
offers,
de
and people
fraude.
have
Entonces,
posted their
les
comments about their
invitamos a visitar
experiences
nuestra plataforma
working for some of
en el
these
portal.
employers.
Pueden revisar si es que hay una reseña sobre esa empresa,
So
si es
people can go there and look to see
ofertas
whether
buenas,
there is
explotadores, maltrato
any
a sus
posted
trabajadores o
experience
no.
about that
Entonces,
about that
igual, ¿no?
how about that farm or employers, see how they treat their workers. So, we hope that this will be helpful to people. And that was the reason why we created this portal, so that the potential employees can have, or potential workers can have direct access to these open opportunities and to the employers, and try to go around the possibility of there being illegal activities that may affect them. Okay, I see another hand up. If you'd like to speak up.
If you would like to share, please go
I
ahead.
have to ask my question in English as a follow-up.
Sorry.
Is the portal only posting jobs available to Mexican workers or for workers from other countries like Southern America or elsewhere?
Sí, puedo intentar responder si quieren y después si Natasha o si Adelina quieren agregar algo, está completamente bienvenido también. Pero desde lo
Okay,
que
I can try to answer that question, but maybe somebody else wants to pitch in. I understand that this portal only publishes Department of Labor information in Spanish.
Hay como ciertos países
So
que pueden
there
recibir como
are
estas visas cada año, pero no son solo de como de
there's
clases
information
solo
about
para
these
México o algo
visas,
así,
but it's
es
not
para
only,
como
but
todos los países
whether this is only
que
from
son
Mexico, I
elegibles
don't
para
think
hacer
it
las
is,
visas H2A.
because every country is eligible to have a H2A visa recipient. So this would be available to everybody, to anybody from any country. Thank you. Also, Natasha, you wrote about vaccination policies in Mexico. Can you tell us more about community, the vaccinations for some of the H2A workers in some communities? Well, I'm going to try to answer and not answer. Policies in Mexico about vaccines. The policy in Mexico is that the best vaccine for you is whichever one's available. For a long time, we did not even have available vaccines, the number of vaccines available for everyone. So within a community, you might be able to see within the vaccination campaigns for people who are 60, 70 years old, they might have access only to a specific brand of vaccine. And then for the next age group, the vaccine would be a different one. For example, some people, take my mother, for example, she got the AstraZeneca vaccine, but my sister or her older daughter got the Sinovac vaccine, and I was given the CanSino vaccine, even though we were in the same community. So we can't really know without a lot of advance notice what vaccine is going to be available to what age group in what community. Also, the H2A recruitment communities, there isn't a specific vaccine for these. So that we have to be clear about that. It's not that some communities, so some of the communities that have already been sending a lot of H2A workers, there's already a historic link there, a relationship, the people that have been sending workers to the same region or to the same employer for the last 10, 20 years. So that could facilitate certain things. But there's also the issue of new workers. The H2A visa program continues to work. There's always the demand continues to grow. So it's likely that you will find a community that has never had these H2A visas is suddenly starting to offer these jobs for migrant workers with visas, and that will change that may have a different effect on the vaccines that people receive before they go. Yes, thank you. It's also important for us to remember that many of the H2A workers are going to return to the US, that are going to return to the US this year. It's likely that the majority of them might have already received their COVID vaccines because they got them last year. So that's also important. So those are the questions that we have right now, because the other questions have been answered in parts of the presentations. So I think that we can now go into the breakout rooms. I think that Adelina or Natasha is going to start to introduce the discussion points. Okay, so we're going to go into our breakouts.
Perfecto, muchas gracias. Así que espero que hayan tenido un espacio productivo en
I
este.
hope that you had
Y ahora voy a pasar la palabra de nuevo a
productive
Natasha. Ella
breakouts, and I'm
está
going
en
to give Natasha the
breakout
floor
rooms
again,
en sus
just to find out what you discussed in your groups. Very well, so just a brief summary. There are people from different states that have used the job orders to identify the fields that the farms that they could go to and the dates. However, one of the important challenges is that on the majority of cases, the housing addresses are not true. They go to the that are listed, and they're supposed to be correct because for H-2A visas, the employer is supposed to provide housing. So in the majority of cases, or at least in many cases, the housing address is incorrect. So there is nobody to respond, or there's nobody who can answer to the question about where those workers are. And that's it. It was really very little time. Thank you. Are there more comments? Anything else that anybody want to share with us? You can put it in the chat or raise your hand. Okay, Veronique, please go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yeah, in English again. People in my group were healthcare providers that relied a lot on contact with the employer to schedule clinics or visits. In my case, I'm a legal service provider, so I also meet the same challenge that was just mentioned about the housing and us not having that same contact with the employer. We can't really go to them to get clarification on where the workers live.
Yo creo que eso es un buen punto que es muy importante que
Well, I think
nosotros
that's also a very important point. That's one of the reasons why we have collaboration with other community organizations, because each organization has its own resources and its own relationships with the employers and with the workers. That's why collaboration is so important for proper outreach. Thank you. Fabian, please. Something that someone within our group was sharing that's very interesting is that outreach right along, she was talking about outreach right along the border. She's doing outreach early, very early in the morning, because that's when people are getting in line to be able to come over here. And I thought that was very, very interesting. Thank you for your comment. Yes. Good morning. Can you hear me? Yes. My name is Maria Aurora Grimm. I work with Family Health here in Wishart County in Wisconsin. What I do is go through all of the highways outside of the towns looking for the work for the farm workers. And I have found many more H2A hired workers. Yesterday, I was driving from Dodge to Jefferson County, and I found farm workers who had just arrived. They were working, and I got them in touch with the state to have an orientation session later in the month of April. That's where we want to partner, and at the same time offer free COVID vaccines and the boosters, free testing. Since they have just arrived, they've had a very long trip. And you never know when, where there might be, the virus might be in a doorway, or, God willing, this doesn't happen, but that, people can get sick. And so we have mobile primary care units. We are a mobile healthcare unit, and we offer primary health for the farm workers. For hired workers, we also help them apply for medical, vision, and dental coverage for the time that they're here. We're seeing hired workers more and more often. And so I offer them our services. Our services are free, and we work throughout the entire state of Wisconsin. And those are the migrant, because we see the migrant seasonal agricultural workers. We have many resources. We can give them referrals to other resources that can be useful to them. I'm going to place the information. I'm going to place a link to our information. And I've also reached out to the state, and they have sent information to me about where these farms are. There are websites there's a list of websites that I've put together where they know when they're going to arrive and for how long. So the recruiters, who they are, where they can be found, their contact information. I've been gathering all of this since I started working here in this job that I've had for 6 months. It's very important to know that there are resources available to them, because there's also the human trafficking program, there's a domestic violence program, there's a legal action program, and all of those resources can be put together, and we can go and educate these farm workers, because there are many programs here that we're here to help them, because like we said, they're no longer in Mexico, and once they get here, things are so different, and that's what we want to educate them on. So in any case, we're here to offer our services here at Migrant Health at our clinic. So we're here to help, to serve in any way. Thank you. And we have very little time left, so we're just going to take one more question, comment. Avin, you have your hand is raised. Yes, I'm not sure who brought this up, but I wanted to see if she was going to share the links about when the H2A workers are going to arrive. I work in Illinois, and one of the challenges that I have is contacting the employers so that they can give me a time for me to offer the services that have been mentioned. COVID tests and vaccines. we take a medical team in case somebody needs help, medical attention, so we can do that. But one of the challenges is for employers to open up and give us some space, some time for us to be able to provide this information to the H2A workers, to the farm workers, or also to some people who work in factories. This tool that was mentioned, I'd like to know if you could share it with us. For example, right now I'm thinking about going there and finding out what time they're going to, what time they leave, so that I can reach out to them on their buses, and finding out whether maybe we could, if needed, we could meet in a motel or a hotel whenever they have free time, maybe at night. So I think, that tool you mentioned is very important, or it sounds very interesting to me. And we have a website too. Somebody mentioned a website too. Yes, we have it, and I will send it to you. Okay, perfect. Fernando's there. Perfect. Well, so that was my question. Okay, Mr. Costas, there is a link that you could go to. You can go to a link that goes to the entire US, and you specify what state you're looking for, what type of what H2A category, and they will tell you what the seasons they're going to work, where they're going to work, and it's a very useful link. I think we had it in the other webinar. It's something that to me is very useful, and I use it, and I go there all the time to see who's going to come, where they're going, when they arrive, and you can see this in the Carolinas or whatever state you want. Yes, okay, thank you. Just got the link. I had it somewhere, but it was easier for me to just ask about it right now. See if somebody could share it with me again right now. Thank you so much. Well, thank you to everyone. Thanks for sharing all of these resources. I think that these are very valuable, and being able to put them in the chat and being able to take advantage of them after this webinar. Thank you, because this way, all of us, we can all learn from each other. So thank you so much. So now we're running out of time. So we did want to mention some last resources. So we are going to share with you all of the entire presentation after the meeting, along with some other resources, some that are in the chat too. So this is the webpage for Farmworker Justice, where Alexis works. They have a lot of resources about many different topics, and they're in Spanish and MAM and Mixteco, and also in English. So just so you'll have this information, this is our webpage, Contratados, where you have the ability to, people have the ability to leave comments, their experiences, which is also very helpful to have this information handy. This is also the Migrant Portal that has the job opportunities or the job orders. There's another website called Salud a Nuestro Alcance, Health Within Our Reach, talks about health in the workplace and the rights that people have. And we're also sharing a chat bot that we have. It's called DOL or SOL, where you can answer some basic questions to farm workers that they might have about their rights in their workplace and regarding their health in their workplace. So we're also going to share all of this. Yes, we'll share all of this. And here is our contact information. If you have more questions after the session, if there's anything specific that you'd like to talk about, we're here to help. And lastly, we didn't put Natasha or Adelina's contact information here, but we can put you in contact with them. I can get you in touch with Natasha and Adelina if you have specific questions about outreach in Mexico. So thank you. Thanks to all of you for participating here today. It's been a pleasure to learn from you, to hear what you've had to say. And hopefully you took also, you took some information, you learned information about what we shared about outreach.